Hello crafters and welcome to this session of Papercraft Fundamentals. Now today we're going to be looking at cutting dies. Now there are two main types. There's the one that comes in the cassette and there are the ones that come individually as well. So I'm going to use a couple of different ones today, a few tips and tricks, and then also look at how we store them. So let's jump in. Okay, so like we said, there's two main types of dies. The first ones are these, depending what brand they're called, but they're thin and they're already cast, and we can see if we look really close, it's got this little blade. So that's the side that does the paper cutting for us. And they come in quite a few different of endless shapes and sizes. So here we've got an example of some art by Marlene. So these come on a card, all ready to use. We've got the Curly Sue ones by Snazzy Scrapping, and hers comes with a whole heap of different things. So this one you can make these cards. So sometimes it's easier than cutting things out or cutting to size because you've got the dies ready to go. So the ones I'm going to play with today are these really simple circle dies. So we're not going to take too much fuss. So the thing we need when we've got a die is a die cutter. So here is my trusty little Cuttlebug. There's so many different sorts and brands, but the main thing is to know that when we put it down, it's got the plate here that the plates go through. There's a handle that that spins to help us feed it through. And then what we need to be considerate of is how we put together these plates to fill the depth of the die. So here we've got, this one comes with a big thick base plate. Now some of the different ones come with different things, but make sure you keep them. Here's one that's already been used quite a bit. Now you can see it's got quite a few cuts and scratches in it. Look, these will break eventually, but you can use it hundreds of times before you're going to do it all together. And that gives you quite a bit of thickness. And then there's a couple of different ways of doing it. What I'm going to do is put my piece of paper down here. Now this is the width of an A4, but I've cut it to just over 5 inches so I know that it will fit within the sides. Just like when we run the laminator through the laminate machine, we need to make sure it fits in. And then with our dies, we're going to want to turn them so that the cutting face is down. Now the other thing I will often do is have little bits of tape to help hold those dies into position. So it just makes it a little bit simpler if we're creating a pattern or nesting so that we get the most out of our paper, particularly if we're using our jelly prints or something like that. So there we go. So we're creating a sandwich. We've got the base, we've got the plate, we've got our paper, we've got our dies with a cutting surface down, and then finally we want to put one on top to create that sandwich. Then we want to lift it up very carefully, take it across, and then start winding the handle. You need to hold it quite firmly because what we're doing is applying pressure so that that die goes through the paper and cuts it. So then we want to take off the sandwich, take off the top plate. We can take off the dies, and there we can see our circles are there and ready to go. So it gives us a huge scope of different shapes, different things. Now, the other great thing is that if you wanted to, with circles, cut more of a frame or something interesting, you can then run that back through and it will create a whole different shape. So that's how easy it is with circle dies. Sometimes with more complex dies or sometimes the cheaper dies, they don't go too well. Needs a bit more pressure. So what you can do is just add a sheet of paper into your sandwich. So we've got the base plate. We could then add the piece of paper in there for that thickness. Put the cutting plate down. Again, paper, dies with a cutting surface down. Look, I've seen some people do the cutting surface up with the paper on top. Completely your preference. Like everything, get to know your own machines and paper and dies, and then that is ready to go. So like I said, the dies come in so many ways. You can do letters, you can do dies, you can do shapes. There's now a whole lot of stamps that then have dies to cut them out rather than fussy cutting them. So that's always lots of fun. But these are with the Thinlit, so some brands call them Thinlit Dies, or they might be the ones. But the key is to make sure you've got that cutting face down when you use them. And then if they are more complex, like the ones I was showing you earlier, with like these Art by Marlene ones, you may need an awl or a sharp needle to then push the pieces out because sometimes they do get a little bit stuck. Again, have a play with the brands and different varieties you've got and learn how to use them to their best of ability. So that's the thinner dies. What we're going to do next is move this out of the way and have a look at the bigger ones or the cassette dies. So I've got a few different ones here. So the range that I've got are the Sizzix ones, and these are the ones designed by Eileen Hull. Now she's got a whole heap. They call them scoreboards, but what they are is they're quite a bit thicker, look a lot more sturdy, and definitely a bit more of an investment. But what this cassette comes with is actually the die cut is recessed into this sponge. So if you've ever been to a printer's where they're doing die cutting, this is closer to the type they've got there. So if you can just make out here, this die's got a cover for the journal, it's got the spine, and then it's got the pages, it's got rounded corners, it's got a score through the middle, and then 2 holes for punching the pages. So when this is used, this is what it looks like. It's got the covers that you just run through twice, the spine, and then the pages, like I said, with the rounded corners, and then with the holes to make it really easy to bind together. With some simple bookbinding techniques. So the way that we need to use this one, particularly these long Sizzix ones, is some of them do fit through the smaller ones, but in this case you need something bigger. You need extended cutting plates, so it puts the pressure across the whole surface, and you can see again that one's well used. And then we want a bigger machine as well. So if I move these out of the way, so you can get some quite big machines. This one's called the Big Shot, and this one is just so well designed for doing this. So again, we're going to create a sandwich. So we're going to have the base down, putting the die down, putting our paper on. Now again, I've cut this to the width, and then putting our plate on top. Lining them all up, particularly with this length, you want to make sure that you've got them quite straight. We don't want to put any extra pressure on this mechanism as we move the die through. So make sure we're clear of all our equipment, line it up. And again, it just needs a little bit of pressure to get started, a nice firm surface, and then we can run that through. A little bit of cracking with the plates, which is what we expect because we are actually sort of carving into them. And then it comes out the other side. Look, sometimes you can run them back through. I think the challenge with that sometimes is that if your paper slips, then you'll end up with sort of a double cut. So again, we've got the top plate. We've then got our beautiful gel print ready to go. So you can see it's got rounded corners, it's got the 2 holes in ready for binding, and it's got just that slightest score, which makes it nice and easy for folding in half. It's all ready to go. And then you can see here, there's the offcut, and then that's actually encroached onto the other part. So that's cut through as well, but that's okay. We don't need that. So that's how we use the cassettes. We still need the plates to give it that thickness to get through the machine, but then it allows us to do much thicker card. So Sizzix also do have a range of boards that's already cut to length, so it's ready to go into that machine and fits in perfectly as well. So keep an eye out for those. It just makes it a little bit simpler sometimes. So the other thing we were going to talk about before we're finishing up is die storage. So the challenge is we want to make sure that we're protecting those edges. So we could start off with, something simple like a die storage box. These come with magnetic sheets that make it easy to put our circles on or our dies on that stick there. And then it makes it easier to flick through and see them as well. So you can get alphabets, you can get all sorts of different ones. And it just makes it easier to store them and stack them. So some other options, and these are the ones I've borrowed from Jenny, are books that hold the dies in as well. So these come with it's a clipboard with magnetic sheets, and then it makes it so much easier here to stick the dies onto. And this allows you to carry them around, easy to see them displayed, and it stores them so that it keeps that sharp edge nice and safe and you're not bending them. If you're not careful where you chuck them into things, they can easily get damaged because some of them can be quite delicate. So you can see we've got all sorts of different backgrounds. Flowers are always popular. words, different size frames. So again, that can be good as we're nesting rather than trying to do it by hand. So they're all really fun ones. And then another one that Jenny's got, this is another cute little one that sort of similar but different. So again, another folder. Oh, it's more all over the place. And this one actually comes with pockets with the magnet sheet in as well. So you can see it's got some letters, we've got some birds, some little robots. So this is another way of keeping them all together, displaying them so we can see them, swirls, dragonflies. You can see how some of these get quite detailed as well, and this is just such a good way to store them so that you can see what they are and then you can find them as well. So just to recap, when we're looking at dies, there really are two main different ones. There's our thin ones that can go through most machines, and particularly if you end up with a much smaller one, you do want to consider what you're putting into it, like what size it will go up to, what thickness you can do. So if you need to adjust it, you can always add shims in so you get a few different layers. And then we've got, like I said, those cassette ones. It's got that thickness to it. It's got the sponge there which protects the blade, but then it also allows us to cut some thicker things to allow us to make lovely little journal covers as well. So that cuts quite a good thickness. So I hope that's given you a bit of an insight into dies. So thank you for joining us for these Papercraft Fundamentals. I hope that's given you a little bit of an insight, particularly those that are just getting started with dies. But as we always say, get to know your equipment, the dies that you've got, the different pages, what sort of thicknesses you're looking at putting through, and practice with some scrap paper so you get that feel of how much pressure you put. If you do find those dies cracking, don't panic. That is completely normal. I know it can be a little bit scary the first few times, and do make sure that you use the plates or the folders that come with the machine you've got, because each of them sort of have different settings and, like we said, have different limits as well. So if you enjoyed that Papercraft Fundamentals, please make sure you like us, subscribe to our YouTube channel, watch all of our other Papercraft Fundamental videos, and of course get in touch with us at the From Picture to Page and Beyond Papercraft shows, because we're holding shows around Victoria, and all of those details are over at our website, FromPictureToPageAndBeyond.com.au. So this is Michelle signing off. I hope you have a crafty day.